$200 billion. A number that should be impossible for a nation like Burkina Faso, where the entire GDP barely reaches 20 billion. And yet it was spoken, not by the IMF. Not by the World Bank, but by a soldier president who dared to defy the script. Ibrahim Traoré did not announce a project, he dropped a thunderclap that left the world asking, where did this come from? But here is the secret hint, this storm was not born overnight. It was months of silent preparation, hidden like a fire smoldering beneath the desert sand, waiting for the wind to turn. Then suddenly, the ground shook. Bulldozers rolled out in waves, as if Normandy had landed again, not to conquer, but to build. Americans might recall Eisenhower's interstate highways that stitched a continent together. But here in the Sahel, the stakes are higher. These roads are not about convenience. They are weapons of sovereignty, survival, and audacity. And the question lingers, sharper than ever, what secret allowed a besieged nation to summon such impossible power? The answer lies ahead. Mile by mile, in a story that could rewrite Africa's destiny. Stay with us, because this is only the beginning. Burkina Faso has just announced a $200 billion road initiative. More than 10 times its GDP. The headline flashed across a few African outlets, echoed quietly in Beijing and Washington, and then, silence. No celebratory op-eds in Paris. No urgent reports from Brussels. For something this colossal, the silence was deafening. Why? Because silence often hides fear. Fear that a new model of sovereignty might be spreading across the Sahel. One built without debt, without Western signatures. A model that others might copy. But this was not just an announcement. Within weeks, the ground roared with machines, 900 of them. Purchased outright. And that is where the mystery deepens. How could a poor, besieged nation move with such command precision? The silence of the West did not drown the roar of engines in Burkina Faso. Instead, it made that roar echo louder, as if the nation was answering neglect with thunder. Every bulldozer moved with a map. Every team worked under a deadline, and every village was assigned a purpose tied to a road. It was not chaos, it was choreography. Steel teeth tore into the earth in rhythm, rewriting the land with each strike. For decades, African infrastructure projects had been trapped in ceremonies and pilot studies designed for foreign donors. Faso Meboa rejected that script. No consultants flew in to lecture. No Western logos decorated banners. What emerged was a campaign that looked less like a public works program and more like a military offensive. Inside government they called it precision. Outside observers, skeptical and fearful, whispered the word madness. The sense of urgency was unmistakable the night the first convoys rolled under guard. Headlights carving paths through the savannah, soldiers on alert for ambush. These were not roads laid for convenience. They were roads laid under fire. Insurgents waited in the north. Bandits prowled in the east, saboteurs always a possibility. Yet the machines pressed forward. Night after night, asphalt spread as if every mile were a battlefront. Even veterans of China's Belt and Road Initiative admitted shock at what was unfolding. But Faso Meboa was no copy. There were no debt contracts, no foreign firms profiting from inflated budgets. Instead, the Burkinabe government had quietly stored gold revenues, restructured domestic taxes, and tapped strategic reserves. The foundation had been built long before the race was announced. That was the hidden key. Then came the moment that silenced doubts. Within weeks, 900 heavy machines, bulldozers, rollers, graders, were purchased outright. Not rented, not borrowed. They belonged to Burkina Faso. And those who operated them were not outsiders flown in for contracts. They were young graduates, many of whom had never touched a machine before. Trained on site, disciplined like recruits in a boot camp, they drove steel giants across the savannah with confidence that grew mile by mile. It recalled the Civilian Conservation Corps during America's New Deal, when thousands of unemployed youth were trained to build dams, parks, and roads. That was once called the greatest classroom without walls. Faso Meboa carried the same spirit, but in harsher conditions, under fire, with no safety net from Washington or Brussels. Orders were delivered not in paperwork but through chains of command. Each zone, Sahel, Cascades, Center-Sud, Center-West, was given monthly targets. Drones hovered above sites, GPS tracked every machine, and delays were corrected in real time. When corruption or incompetence appeared, officials did not linger. They were removed quickly, often without announcement, before failure could poison momentum. Burkina Faso was not rehearsing development. It was executing it at the speed of survival. Roads were not neutral lines on a map. They became arteries of sovereignty. Without them, the country was fragmented and fragile. With them, the nation was a single body, able to move, breathe, and fight. This urgency created a new logic of governance. To outsiders it seemed extreme, even authoritarian. But to a people surrounded by insurgency and economic siege, it was common sense. To survive, the state had to move like an army, disciplined, direct, and decisive. And yet beyond speed and order lay something even more daring: vision. Faso Meboa was not drafted to impress in a 5-year election cycle. It was designed in 25-year stages, meant to outlast presidents, donors, and even coups. It was not planning for applause. It was planning for permanence. In a land accustomed to promises broken as easily as glass, permanence itself was revolutionary. Each new road carried weight far heavier than stone. It carried the possibility of rewriting the state, of proving that sovereignty is not a speech but a structure. Asphalt became the constitution under construction, binding villages and cities together with something stronger than words. And so the question now stretched far beyond engineering. If roads could function as the covenant of a nation, what future was being written in tar and gravel? Could this model endure its own scale? Or would ambition, as immense as the dream itself, threaten to crack it from within? For now, the answer remained uncertain. But one truth was clear. Burkina Faso was no longer waiting to be told what was possible. It was proving it, mile after mile, with dust, sweat, and steel. In Burkina Faso, asphalt is not just black stone pressed into the ground. It is liquid gold. Every mile poured across the savannah sends a pulse through the veins of the economy. A rhythm that can be felt in markets, in schools, in households that once lived in isolation. What used to be considered remote is now being reclassified as reachable. Villages long trapped by broken paths are suddenly plugged into a national grid of possibility. Farmers who once watched crops rot in storage now see them packed, shipped, and sold in the same week. This is not an adjustment. It is a revolution. For years, transportation costs consumed nearly half the value of rural goods. A sack of onions could be worth 5,000 CFA in the city, but the cost of getting it there across rutted dirt roads made the journey pointless. Farmers sold cheap or lost everything. Now asphalt has cut that loss in half. Cooperatives form around intersections. New storage facilities appear. Trucks roll in and out with predictability, and women, who dominate local markets, become the biggest winners. They restock faster, sell fresher, and multiply profits that once evaporated in the dust. The road does not simply move goods. It multiplies dignity. The transformation is visible at the roadside. Where there was once silence at nightfall, new economies are springing up like green shoots after rain. Small repair shops, food stalls, fuel kiosks, motorcycle depots, all clustering around intersections. Glowing with solar lights that pierce the darkness. Entire settlements are growing where there were only scattered huts. Children eat meals from roadside kitchens while their parents sell produce. Motorcycles buzz in and out like bees around a hive. In America, Route 66 was called the Main Street of America, where diners and motels flourished. In Burkina Faso, these highways are becoming the main street of survival itself. The labor market is shifting too. Faso Meboa has absorbed idle youth who once drifted toward despair or even insurgency. Young men and women now train in masonry, surveying, machine operation, and project management. They sign contracts, earn wages, and acquire skills. Some build the roads, others audit them. And as they work, money moves. Mobile money transfers have doubled in newly connected zones. Markets that once opened twice a week are now bustling daily. Incomes are redistributing not by decree, but by direction. The road decides where money flows, and with it, hope flows as well. Migration patterns are beginning to reverse. For decades, skilled tradesmen and teachers fled rural postings for the capital. Now, with roads connecting villages to hospitals and supply chains, Many are willing to stay or even move back. Secondary cities are expanding. Schools once abandoned are seeing teachers return, knowing they are no longer stranded. The drain that hollowed out rural Africa is slowing. Perhaps reversing, because asphalt has shortened the distance between dignity and despair. Trade across borders is shifting as well. Burkina Faso may be landlocked, but with roads. It is becoming a transit state. Traders now move more easily between Mali, Niger, Togo, and Côte d'Ivoire. Informal commerce that once relied on risky bush paths now flows through structured corridors. Trucks no longer stall in mud for days. Caravans no longer gamble with bandits on detours. The landlocked nation is rebranding itself as a crossroads of West Africa. And every passing truck is another reminder that sovereignty can be paved. Yet beneath the excitement lies a question. How far can this momentum carry? Will these new roadside markets flourish or collapse under their own weight? Will teachers stay if inflation rises? Will farmers trust the state if sabotage disrupts the chain? For now, the asphalt hums, and the hum itself is hope. But hope on wheels must always be defended. The road that delivers prosperity can just as quickly become the line that must be held. For the first time in Burkina Faso's modern history, insurgents were pushed back not by bullets but by asphalt. Roads stretching into the north and east carried more than goods. They carried the state itself. Where the government had once been absent, existing only as rumor or memory, the asphalt arrived as proof. A journey that once took 4 hours over broken terrain was cut to 40 minutes on a paved highway. With that speed came a reversal of advantage. The enemy who relied on isolation now found their refuge shrinking. The state, once late to every crisis, was suddenly early, present. Undeniable. Villages that once bowed to insurgents for permission to trade or travel now faced a different reality. The road did not bring negotiations. It brought clinics that delivered on time. Teachers who showed up, food trucks that replenished stocks during drought. Sovereignty no longer lived only in Ouagadougou. It pulsed through every stretch of asphalt, breathing life into communities that had been left behind. Where fear once silenced conversations, pride now filled the air. People pointed to the road and said, "This protects us more than any wall." There was a turning point when elders began guiding security forces to militant hideouts. Young men hired to build the roads became their defenders, standing guard over the very projects they had poured sweat into. Mobile defense units, part engineer and part infantry, moved with the convoys, building by day and protecting by night. The enemy retreated not because more guns were fired but because the state arrived first, stronger and faster. It was psychological warfare written in asphalt. The sight of graders and rollers advancing like armored columns disoriented entire generations who had grown up watching only NGO convoys or UN trucks. Now it was their own state, with its own machines, its own logos, and its own people trained to lead. Americans might remember how interstate highways were designed with national defense in mind. Meant to move troops across the continent with unmatched speed. Burkina Faso's roads carry the same logic but under far greater pressure, where every convoy may mean the difference between survival and collapse. Here, asphalt is not neutral. It is contested terrain. Whoever controls the road controls the future. And this is where your voice matters. If you believe infrastructure is more than concrete, that it is the living shield of sovereignty, share your thoughts in the comments. Every word adds to the chorus reminding the world that Africa is not waiting to be saved. Africa is choosing to defend itself, mile by mile, stone by stone. Yet shadows remain. Night convoys have been attacked. Equipment has been sabotaged. Supply depots have been raided. None of this came as a surprise. Traoré's administration anticipated sabotage and fused defense with development. Each kilometer of progress is guarded like a front line. Each road is built with the awareness that it may be targeted. In Africa, roads have never been neutral. They are battlegrounds where the fight for sovereignty is waged without speeches. Only with speed and presence. Every new mile laid carries unease beyond Burkina Faso's borders. Foreign capitals watch uneasily as asphalt turns into doctrine, merging sovereignty with infrastructure. War with development, the state with its people. And as whispers spread across the Sahel, others are already imagining what might happen if this doctrine crosses borders, creating alliances not written in treaties but paved in stone. The question is no longer whether Faso Meboa can deliver. The question is whether the world is prepared to face a nation that has chosen to make its roads both its shield and its sword. Every mile of progress is also a target. As asphalt stretched deeper into Burkina Faso, the promise of roads turned into pressure points. Sabotage was reported on night convoys. Equipment was burned in isolated sites. Supply depots were raided. What looked unstoppable revealed its vulnerabilities. The very strength of Faso Meboa, its speed, its scale, its defiance, also painted a bullseye on every bulldozer and every plan. Momentum had become both armor and exposure. Whispers from abroad spoke of nervous meetings in foreign capitals. Analysts described the initiative not as development but as a threat. For institutions long accustomed to African states waiting for permission, the sight of Burkina Faso building without them was intolerable. Pressure began to mount quietly: financial blockades, attempts to sway officials, rumors seeded in the press. Sovereignty written in asphalt was harder to dismiss than a speech. And that made it dangerous. To succeed was to embarrass those who claimed Africa could not stand alone. Inside the country, risks also multiplied. Mobilizing $200 billion meant bottlenecks, shortages, inflation, and the constant fear that workers might go unpaid. A single misstep could unravel trust. Public faith, so far powered by visible results, could just as quickly sour if delays appeared. That is why Traoré's administration moved with relentless urgency, correcting mistakes before they became scandals, dismissing failures before they became betrayals. Roads were not only about connection. They were about credibility, and credibility had to be guarded as fiercely as the asphalt itself. The twist of this story is that every kilometer paved carried both salvation and peril. Villages that celebrated new markets also knew that insurgents could strike them tomorrow. Teachers who accepted rural postings now traveled faster, but wondered if their classrooms would one day be caught in the crossfire of ambition. Foreign powers studied each mile as both inspiration and provocation, questioning whether to imitate or to sabotage. The very act of building had become a form of defiance, and defiance has always invited retaliation. Burkina Faso was proving something extraordinary, that a nation under siege could chart its own course. Yet in proving it, the nation exposed itself. The roads that stitched the country together also stitched it into the crosshairs of geopolitics. Was Faso Meboa the foundation of a new sovereignty, or the beginning of a new struggle? The answer lay not in speeches, not even in asphalt, but in the storms gathering beyond the horizon. Africa does not need saving. It needs space. That is the final message carried by the roads of Burkina Faso. Each mile of asphalt is not just a path to markets or schools, it is a declaration that sovereignty can be built, not begged for. Ibrahim Traoré's gamble has turned bulldozers into pens, writing a new chapter of defiance across the Sahel. The spirit of Faso Meboa is not about concrete. It is about courage. A poor nation under siege chose to act as if it were already free, and in that act, it discovered freedom itself. The question for the world is no longer whether Burkina Faso can succeed, but whether others will find the will to follow. If this story has moved you, do not let it fade when the screen goes dark. Like this video, share your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel. Your voice joins a growing chorus that says Africa Rising is not a slogan, it is a reality being paved before our eyes. Now it is our turn. Together, we keep the fire alive.